you do have something accepted, it's such a surprise. I mean, when I made the long list, I was like, my goodness, what on earth has happened here? And then I missed the Friday announcement on Twitter.
Yeah.
And I was just like, sitting around on Saturday afternoon after yoga, I was just about to repot my plants. So let me check on Twitter. And then there, ta-da.
Right. Congratulations on being shortlisted for the prize. No, that's you came from many, I have to say. I think we had over 300 entries.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yes, so to make it to the top 5 is, yes, that's something you should definitely announce from the hilltops.
I will. I'm trying to announce as much as far as I can. I'm not very good at Twitter, but I did. I'm so excited. I tweeted something I didn't at first. But yeah, that was great.
No, I'm glad. So how did that make you feel, hearing the news? Tell me.
I mean, so because one thing I've learned about trying to write fiction is, to sort of live with rejection.
Of course.
And so I've gotten really good at living with rejection. So I was just like, and when you get those, thank you, but no, and you get the other journals who are like, have you read out?
You know what we're about?
Yeah, this is my interpretation of what the journal on, So you can't, and you don't take it personally. And so, the flip side of that is when you do have something accepted, it's such a surprise. I mean, when I made the long list, I was like, my goodness, what on earth has happened here? And then I missed the Friday announcement on Twitter.
Yeah.
And I was just like, sitting around on Saturday afternoon after yoga, I was just about to repot my plants. So let me check on Twitter. And then there, ta-da. And I was, and I'm more than anything, I think I'm excited. I'm glad for the story and the characters. Because I've kind of been living in my head for a while, and I'm glad they're out there, and I wonder what it's like for them. And no,
if they've been in your head, like I've read the story, and I'm really glad I got to experience them as I did. And I will talk to you a lot more about, well, not too much about it in a minute. But I was also reading your bio. So you have a very impressive profile, I have to say. Your work in journalism and as a researcher, and it feels like you've got many plates spinning at the same time. How does that work? How does that, how does your day job kind of help you delve into the world of fiction as you
how it helps? I mean, I think sometimes that because my day job is so in the real world, that sometimes I worry that my fiction doesn't go far enough from the real world. And so I'm trying to push myself to leave it a little bit. But then again, I think also, do I need to leave? Because there's so much to still say here. And I may never. Yeah. So I think about that all the time. And I think, so how I've been able to do it is that the fiction has been an escape from journalism. Not that I need an escape. I quite love being a journalist. But I know that there's also this other part of me that really needs to write and create and to do things and to make up worlds. And then I go back into the real world and I write about the real world. And so what I've done was, I've tried to be really intentional about how I set my day. Mm-hmm. So what I used to do was I would wake up early, not every day, 3 days a week.
Yeah.
And then just write for an hour.
Okay.
And sometimes the writing would come. Mm-hmm. And sometimes I would just write a word. Sometimes I would, so, and that really, because I had sort of reached a point in journalism, sort of like my personal long night, the soul, dark night. So where I just wasn't sure why I was doing what I was doing anymore. And it felt like my stories were becoming repetitive, and it felt like, you just, you end up writing the same kinds of stories, but you don't see it. I think every journalist goes through that. And then also, because it's such a relentless news cycle, there was a question, well, I'd become a journalist because I wanted to be a writer, but I grew up in a community where you don't go and be an author because we just can't afford it. So
I understand.
Yeah. So I lost sight of why I became a journalist, and also along the way ended up really loving being a journalist. And so when I had that sort of dark night of the soul, I decided that the only way to truly do both and to sort of feel fulfilled was to do both, was to create the world and to report on the world. And it also made me intentional about the stories that I chose to report on and the stories that I chose to write on. And what that meant was just literally blocking off time to write.
Right. Okay.
So that's how.
Right. So has it worked the other way then, where your fiction has helped you come to terms more and more with your day job?
I think so. What the fiction has made me do is realize the kind of writer I can be. I think sometimes, particularly with journalism, and because we have such a set of expectations as a reader, your lead must pull you in, it must be 30 words or so, it must have a dateline, it must tell you where. And so you become quite rote about it. Mm-hmm. And so what's been lovely about being a journalist, writing more fiction, is that I'm reminded that I don't have to write in that pattern.
Yeah.
And in that very strict form. And I've also sat with my, in the fiction world, they're characters, in the journalism world, they're sources. And I've sat with them longer and tried to understand them a little bit better. And I'm learning to do that. Okay. And so that's been a helpful.
That's good. Yeah. I think that ties into what you were saying in your bio, where you say you're still finding your voice.
Yeah.
I would say is a modest statement given your entry, but if you're still, yeah, definitely. If you're still finding what motivates you to keep on with that search? What pushes you to keep going?
I think it's the characters. And I don't mean to sound woo-woo, but I'm going to give into the woo-woo. And that is that. So when as a journalist, the things that move you is a sense of anger and a sense of purpose, right? Or a sense of injustice. And that's why I want to report this particular story. And then with the fiction is that the stories kind of show up, and then the character kind of like wanders around my flat for a while. And then you haven't read me properly. Or I just need to get the story out. Or I'm going on a walk and some story pops into my head, and then I write that down, and then I don't get it right the first time. I don't get it right the fifth time. And it's just to sort of honor them. And I think a lot of that also comes from the journalism, right? Because particularly if you are an African woman writing about Africa, you've been misrepresented for so long.
Of course.
That I think that a large part of my purpose and my job is to represent us with a sense of dignity. Mm-hmm. And I feel similarly about the characters. Like I still, have I gotten it right? Have I gotten their voices through? Have they come to tell the story? Have I told the story that they've come to tell? That's what I think. That sounds woo-woo, and I will accept it. And maybe
I understand. And you raise a good point about being misrepresented or underrepresented in contemporary literature. And it's good that we have voices trying to kind of steer that in the right direction. It doesn't need to be in a positive light, but I think just to be able to see yourself in the stories that you read on a normal day, you don't all have to be queens and vanquishers of evil, but you just a regular day.
We can just be peasants in a bad mood, and that's okay.
Yeah. Of course, yes. No, I completely relate to that struggle. Yeah. Sure. Yeah.
A bit of nuance. And I think so long when we spoke about nuance, we taking it all the way to the opposite end, right? These queens and that's
of course, exactly. And there's so much middle ground that we just don't explore. Yeah.
Just the freedom to be a mess, mm-hmm. and the freedom to be average.
Of course. That's such a good phrase, the freedom to be average. Yeah, I like that.
Thanks.
So again, I think it said that you've got a collection of essays to be published this year on historical and contemporary South African identities.
Yeah.
So
I know this. Mm-hmm.
No, I was going to say that's good. Congratulations again. It's looking like a great year for you, I have to say.
It is. It's a busy year. There are many balls juggling, but it's I think it's going to be a good year.
Yeah. Okay. Can you share with us a little bit more about that?
Yes. So South Africa has an ethnic group that are called coloured, and I know elsewhere in the world this phrase is taken with a bit of shock, and in South Africa it's equally heavy, but it's still in use. And so I am coloured, and so what a friend and I were doing was 2 years ago in 2020 there was a police killing in the neighbourhood that I grew up in, Eldorado Park, and the hashtag Coloured Lives Matter appeared.
Okay,
I was trying to explain, first of all, that the use of the word, this use is still the word is still in use. B, what does it mean? Why are these people not seeing themselves as Black after all these years? Because, and this, my friend, and fellow author Tessa Dooms and I were talking about how we genuinely thought that by 2020 and now 2022 that nobody would be using the term coloured anymore. Yes. It's not only is it being used, there's a sort of like a real holding on to it. And it's being held on to by people who were born after apartheid. Okay. And that was a bit of a shock. And I think when that hashtag emerged, it was a sign that this needed to be unpacked a lot more, that this was the sense of identity and why we're still holding on to it. And also that a lot of people didn't understand it. They didn't understand where colored people came from. There seems to be this idea that, between 9 and 11 million people in South Africa came from a black mother and a white father. That's just not possible in apartheid, right?
Of course, yeah.
Physically possible. And the question is, where do these people come from? And I think it's also a story about people who are colored themselves often could only trace their heritage back to 2 to 3 generations. And so they themselves are asking, where do we come from? And so we've explored it in a way that looks at colored culture and identity and how it was built from food, from language, from music, from the idea that colored people see themselves as social orphans.
Of course.
The idea about how masculinity has formed in this identity, how femininity has been formed in this identity. And so we're excited to what will come of it. And I think also because being colored also comes with a lot of stereotypes in South Africa.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah.
Yep. So to sort of unpack what those stereotypes mean, and sometimes those stereotypes have actually been embraced by the community. So we ask ourselves, well, why is that then? Why do some men see such admiration in gangsterism, for example? What does that say about who we are? So, and also with a woman and a sense of modesty in the church, why is that still so valued?
Right. That's very interesting. I think we're looking forward to that.
Oh, thanks.
Really good. Yeah, I think that would be a very, very nice read and a good education as well into what the situation still is, or after all this time. Yeah. So I think you've got elements of that in your story, actually. This leads nicely to your actual rain dance, which is a great title. Again, as you can tell, I'm a fan. I really liked the style of the writing and the storytelling of it. There were elements that really made me think, oh, wow, okay, this... Again, it's written as though this is decades ago or something, but we could be experiencing this now. This could be a story of now. And without giving too much away, can you tell us why you chose to express spirituality in the way that you did?
I'm trying to think how the story came. So I joined a writing group just before the pandemic started, and I was wondering if I could write as a teenager or as a child. And then decided, and then just before that, I'd gone on a road trip. I think it was, I can't remember when exactly it was, but I'd gone on this road trip around Southern Africa and South Africa, and we'd passed all these little towns, and I just wondered what it was like to live in these towns and what your sense of identity was like, and then and the story just came into my mind about this idea of, who, depending on who you are and how you see yourself, that's who your God is.
Yeah.
What happens if you have these identities that are at odds, or that you don't really know what your identity is, that you're still trying to figure it out? And so which God do you pray to? And also, and I guess it does come from the idea of being colored and how religion was quite often used as, and in many post-colonial societies, how religion is used to police our identity and to take away. And then in South Africa, in a country that's so obsessed with race and phenotype, like your hair, your skin, and I mean, this color doesn't exist everywhere again, right? It's just South Africa, it's legislated. And so then the question is, well, what happens? How does that then inform how you see the world and who you pray to? And so that kind of just those ideas played around in my head. And
no, they really come through in the story, I think. Your story definitely speaks to, living experiences and your strata, you could say, as determined by color and phenotype and different specific characteristics of a phenotype. And as you say, this is an issue that is in South Africa and not many other places in the world, I would say. Or maybe they exist, but we don't quite have a public open recognition of this. Yeah. So I think maybe in South Africa, the conversations are probably being had more than anywhere else where the issues still persist. Yeah. So is that, would you say that this whole obsession with race definitely shapes your work. And this could be your day job or your fiction writing. And so, yeah.
I think writing in South Africa in general, it sometimes feels impossible to escape race. I'd like to, and I'm still trying to figure out how to do it.
Yeah.
And I think with this one in particular, and as I said, I'm still finding my voice. I don't think my writing has matured enough to entirely leave myself behind. And so what happened was, and I suppose I was drawing on my own experience of what it was like to grow up, seen, and I say this again, qualifying it in that, because colored people have such a vast way of what we look like. I was considered dark-skinned, and of course my hair is not so straight, and I wear my hair natural. And so just those kinds of decisions and how that shaped my view of the world. And so when I was wondering what it was like to be a little girl, I think I didn't quite leave myself behind in that. Of course, it's an extreme example, but and I think, and I suppose in many ways, in that sense, fiction is an easier way to try and understand race than writing as a journalist, because I think because so little has changed inside, not little has changed, but because so much of South Africa is still a long race.
Yeah.
It becomes very frustrating, and it does feel like you're writing the same story over and over. And so what fiction then does is it allows me to sort of play with race.
Yeah.
This thing that seems to have so much power over our lives. Yes. What happens when I'm the one making up the world, and how do I play with race? What do I do with it, and what can I do? And so I think that's where that came from. Yeah, I wish I could say that I was a lot more intentional about how the story came out. I have to say it just.
No, I understand. Well, race has shaped, much of our history, and as you say, much of our daily lives. So it's completely understandable that you create from that.
Yeah,
I would. I understand that totally. It's in fact, I think maybe it takes even more to create from what is a personal experience, because you have to then put it on a paper and mold it in such a way that you're still communicating while still feeling all the emotion behind it. So yeah, that makes absolute sense. Yeah.
And I wonder, like even when I'm reading science fiction, for example, or fantasy, like I'm a massive fan of N.K. Jemisin. And I realize that when I read N.K. Jemisin, I imagine all the characters as Black. They are not human.
Yes. They're usually without color in my mind.
Yeah, exactly.
Just these like clear people, just clear. Light goes right through my mind.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And yet in my head, they are Black people. And so I wonder if it's even possible. And I think to a large, I wonder if it's perhaps the experience of being Black, and it's sort of like a unique and yet universal experience. And so even when you created an entirely new world, that as you're writing those characters, do I see them as Black because it's so familiar to me because of where the writing comes from? I wonder about that. I mean, I'm still very much figuring it out. So I will experiment at some point. Or maybe I don't even have to. Maybe Toni Morrison has given me the freedom to never have to worry about.
You don't know what the future holds. Yeah.
We don't know.
So who knows what's going to happen in a couple of years? Exactly. So that's good. I'm really looking forward to, reading the rest of the stories in the anthology with yours in there. I think it fits very nicely, and it gives a very fresh perspective on spirituality. Speaking of the theme, actually, and connecting it to the African identity, when you hear spirituality, I don't need to tell you, there will be the very obvious takes on it, especially when you consider being African. Given those takes and how you've chosen to express it, how would you say that spirituality and the African identity are inextricably linked? So can you be African and non-spiritual? Or, can you? Is that a state of being?
I mean, I didn't think I will be, maybe I'll shoot myself in the foot for this later, but I didn't think I might take a particularly original I thought, that there would just be this most wonderful mermaids and all sorts of things coming out. And I look forward to reading the rest of the anthology.
Yeah.
Mermaid in there. But I think it comes down again to being the freedom to be average, right?
Mm.
I think there's a wonderful thing about being African in our spirituality and sort of like, particularly what's happening in South Africa now, there seems to be a sort of rediscovery of spirituality and African spirituality and how that fits into this world today, right? Because it's impossible to go back.
Of course.
So how do our spirits and gods fit into this capitalist, postmodern, post-apartheid world? So there's that. But then I also think if we were to be truly free and to truly express who we were as Africans in the way that we wanted to, then surely I should be able to be given the space to be an agnostic, atheist African as well.
Yes.
Where if I simply decided that for me to be who I am is to simply live where I am with no God, no spiritual connection. And so I think it comes down to how we create African identity and how we're still how we're still figuring it out. I think a lot of still now, how we express our identity is very much still in reference to and sort of in rebellion to a colonial identity.
Okay.
And I wonder what it will look like when we're not responding to
that. Yeah, that's a very interesting concept. Yeah.
So I think it's my generation and our generation's job, because colonialism is still fresh in our heads, that we're still detangling ourselves and breaking it up. But I'm really interested in thinking about what happens in 50 years' time when it's less, hopefully, or maybe a century from now, when it's less of a specter in our lives, and when we have the entire freedom to build who we are from our own foundations. And so what does that look like when we say we're spiritual and we're African? It's like Emmanuel is one of the most wonderful philosophers, African philosophers, and his take is we spend so much time trying to prove that African philosophy exists. We contort ourselves and we bend to try and show that there's deontology, ontology. And he says we're wasting our time. We should simply just be. We shouldn't sit there and try and explain that why Ubuntu or form is a form of philosophy. We should just do it. And so what I would say, if we were to think about identity in the same way, maybe one day, I don't know how to express my identity without having some sort of response to colonialism or racism. And so I wonder what that might be like for somebody who doesn't have to do this work.
I think so. I think it would be good to see how we tell our stories, 200-300 years down the line.
I know that's not an answer.
No, but still, that's a line of thinking that's worth pursuing. Years and years and years from now, I don't know if 300 years is enough for us to start to shed some of this weight that we carry. But it would be very interesting to see how people that come after us view what came before them. Yeah, because we're very much in our history.
I think we do have something special about us, and I do think that we have a connection to who we are and where we come from. Like I'll enter some spaces and I'm like, oh, this is a deeper connection. This is something that's here. There's something that vibrates higher, I guess.
Yes.
But I sometimes wonder, am I feeling that because I am African and that's 100% true, or am I feeling because I am responding to the fact that identity was taken away and now I have to reclaim it?
Okay.
So
no, I hear you.
That's the story that I wrote, huh?
Yeah. No, I hear what you're saying. Just thinking back to your story now with the main character, I could sense this kind of like split in loyalty almost between family and friend. There's this love of friend. You kind of like you have what's the word? You have this sense of love and cherishment for somebody who technically maybe your family doesn't approve of, and so they kind of lead you down this path almost literally. And it just shows how there's always a side to you that I think that's worth exploring outside of what is comfortable for you. And I quite liked that theme, I think, in your story. Yeah. So was that something that did that just unfold with the story, or was that a conscious? Yeah.
I think so. In the others that I've written, I've found a theme, and I had a really great friend take a look at it, friend and editor take a look at it, and she said, I'm beginning to see a theme here, in that rebellious women. I just thoroughly enjoy women who aren't.
Exactly, that's the term I was looking for. Yes, yeah.
And so and sometimes it's a friendship, sometimes, and I think particularly with the friendship, and a friendship with the boy in this sense, is that in a culture where she's told to find a husband, to value a boy as a friend, and to value somebody who is not seen as acceptable or viable husband material, I think that's, and also because she's at this age where she's sort of figuring out, I think it's just before puberty, so like, do I follow what my mothers and sisters says?
Yes.
And, how do I then interpret my own femininity and my own role as a woman, and where that will take her, and then also this idea that will also dictate who gets to be her friend. And so I think the relationship is a really authentic relationship. I think
it is. You can get the sense of the purity of it. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm glad that came across.
Yes, definitely.
Okay, great. And so I wonder then, does one then have to sacrifice those kinds of relationships in order to fit in the box and tick the boxes that are required of well-behaved women?
Mm-hmm. That is the question. I think that's a lifelong question. I've been faced with that question. Everyone has, in some way, shape, or form, and I think the story really highlights it in a good way. I was rooting for her, for sure.
I mean, I don't know what happened to her after.
Yeah. I was rooting for her. At the very end, I was like, oh my God, I hope it works. Yeah. No, I really enjoyed it. And I hope that, when it comes out, you feel as proud as we do of the story. And yes.
I was just really glad that someone else read it.
You can just read it, but it was good. Exactly. And the judges thought it was really good. Top 5. Again.
I'm really excited. Thank you so much. And I think it's just, and thank you also for having platforms like this, because I think often when you're writing on the continent, there's this, you're saying earlier, you have to write in a certain way in order to be seen as an African writer, right?
I do understand. Yes.
Yeah. And so
there's so much else, what's the phrase? Poverty porn?
Yes, poverty porn. And then also there's a certain literary pattern that's emerged, or like sort of like a cutout that's emerged, like how to be an African writer,
Yes.
And so I'm really grateful. And one always hopes that you didn't fall into that stereotype, and I hope I didn't. But I'm also really grateful that there are platforms where we don't have to be.
No, you don't have to be. Yes. So we definitely welcome and are in the business of trying to find emerging voices, people. It's not, you see the same names every day, but we are a continent of millions of people. There's got to be more than the 5 people you hear from every day. And that, I think that's the line. That's what we follow. That's what we work by. Yeah, that's it. No, thank you for appreciating that. We'll keep doing it. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there are a billion ways to be African. Right?
Of course. Yeah. So what if you had a message for everyone who read your story, what would that be?
Shit down.
They've read it. So you have to say something else.
No, I think if I had any message, I think I think it's to live in our own duality or multiple versions of ourselves. I think that's when we are our best versions, when we are equally messy and equally talented and wonderful and brutal and all those things. So I think to embrace all those sides of things.
That's a good message. Yeah. I'll take that because I read it, so I'll take that. Yeah, that's a good message. Now, if you have a message for an aspiring writer who's looking forward to the next edition, say next year's edition of the prize, what would your advice to that person be?
And I know that I've been shortlisted, so they might not take me seriously with this one, but I implore them to imagine that I have been rejected 1,000 times before being accepted. And so it's to learn to live with rejection. It truly is not personal, though it does feel personal in many cases. Yeah. In fact, I think it's a badge of honor to be rejected as a writer. It just means, it's a chance to go back and fix it, which is what happened with this one, right?
Yeah.
And then also, I think, to be intentional about writing. I think that's when things changed for me. Like, I knew I wanted to be a writer, but I wasn't actually doing the writing. And so, just to get up every day and sit. And I didn't get it right every day, but I think to just make time for your writing, to block it off and to make it as important as anything else in your life. Like, it's my writing time. No one else gets to be here but me and the characters. You need that space. Yeah.
Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah. No, thank you for that. That's a really good message. Thank you.